Apple kills independent repair on the new MacBook Pro. Plus, they're facing reports of price gouging at their Apple stores. Microsoft, they joined the Open Invention Network and they open source over 60,000 of their patents. GNOME plans to no longer use application menus starting with the next version, GNOME 3.32, plus a new website. They claim Flatpak is not as safe and secure as most users think. They call Flatpak, quote, a security nightmare. Linux for Kids. Here are 15 of the best educational applications for your children. These are 5 stories that I will be taking into account. So, the first story on the docket is a very disturbing one, especially for those of you that are Mac users. So, Apple plans to kill independent repair on the new MacBook Pro. Plus, there's also reports out there of Apple Store price gouging. It's actually 2 separate stories, but they're somewhat related. So, this first story here from Motherboard. Apple's new proprietary software locks will kill independent repair on the new MacBook Pro. Failure to run Apple's proprietary diagnostic software after a repair will result in an inoperative system and an incomplete repair. So basically, this is Apple's, it's a new way for them to lock down your system. Again, Apple is very much a walled garden. You really can't do much with the hardware or software to begin with. And now they want to make it so that you pretty much have to take it to an authorized Apple repair service, such as the Apple Store, to get repairs on your MacBook Pro. You can't just take it to any Joe Blow out on the street who may be qualified to work on these things. They want to lock these things down. There's actually an update to the story here in the first paragraph. I'll come back to the update. But the original story, which was published several days ago, maybe a week ago. Apple has introduced software locks that will effectively prevent independent and third-party repair on 2018 MacBook Pro computers, according to internal Apple documents obtained by Motherboard. So, Apple sent out a document a couple of weeks back. It was distributed to all the Apple Authorized Service Providers, the AASPs, and basically announcing this new policy that all Apple computers with a new T2 security chip, which is present in the new 2018 MacBook Pros and the iMac Pro. Basically, the software lock will kick in for any repair that involves replacing a MacBook Pro display, assembly, logic board, top case, Touch ID board, etc. Anyway, it will kick in if the logic board or the flash storage are replaced. Basically, this is a way to force you to take your computer to an authorized service provider. So what this is they have this new diagnostic suite, the software that you have to run. So it mentions the parts on the MacBook and the iMac that basically will no longer be able to be repaired by third-party repairmen. What happens if you try to replace one of these parts or repair one of these parts, the repair is not complete until you run this new diagnostic software that Apple is calling the Apple Service Toolkit 2. So your computer will not begin to function correctly until after that diagnostic software is run. Basically, preventing you from just taking your computer anywhere because no one's going to have the Apple diagnostic software at self-authorized Apple service providers, such as the Apple Store. So this is obviously very disturbing. This is, a complete lockdown of the system because there have been reports that the Apple Store is not treating customers respectfully. There's a new claim by the CBC that Apple repair policies are abusive, but proof falls far short. This article here is from Apple Insider. So they're debunking the CBC's claims here, and we'll give it a fair shot here, even though this is an Apple-friendly website. A report from the CBC has attacked Apple's policies and practices regarding repairs, taking the company to task for expensive in-store repairs, coercing customers to buy new products in some cases, but the publication shows a stunning lack of understanding of the scale of Apple's repair efforts, so there's some Apple apologists writing this story, but basically the CBC, they sent somebody undercover to a Toronto Apple store with a common problem where the screen wasn't working properly. The guy at the store, he inspects it, and it was noted that there's a lot of liquid that's gotten on the inside, so it's, might have been immersed in water, or maybe it just been a high humidity problem. Anyway, he figures up the repair cost for this MacBook, and he figures the cost would be a minimum of $1,200, with $600 and $500 quoted to replace the logic board and the top case, $100 for labor. If the display needs replacement, that would also be an extra $780. When further pressed, if there was a way to make it cheaper, the genius at the Apple Store advised the fee is very close to cost of buying a new computer in terms of fixing it in the store. No? They then took the MacBook Pro, the exact same MacBook Pro that was going to cost about $1,200 to fix at the Apple Store. They took it to a prominent YouTube repair personality, repair shop owner Louis Rossmann, who saw the same indicators in his inspection, meaning he saw that there was water in the computer. It's definitely been immersed in some kind of liquid, or maybe just triggered by high humidity. Anyway, after discovering the display worked but without a backlight, a bent pin in a display connector was found to be the fault, which was then pressed back into place as a repair within a few minutes. So all he did was bend a pin back into place, and magically the computer worked again. Rossmann claims he could have provided the customer the repair for free as a short-term solution, one he believes would last for the remaining lifetime of the computer. If the customer wanted a replacement cable as a longer-term solution, Rossmann estimates the cost to be between $75 to $150. So nowhere near the $1,200 that the Apple Store genius was planning to charge this guy. Anyway, the CBC story, I'm not sure if it's already aired on TV or if it's a print story, but anyway, this is the Apple Insider article about that. Of course, I will link to this article. I will also link to the motherboard article about them locking down their systems with the AS2 diagnostic software. They did post an update since this story went to publication over at Motherboard. They mentioned that iFixit testing has found that Apple's software locks are not yet operative, so this is not happening just yet. This service document certainly paints a grim picture, but ever the optimist, we headed down to our friendly local app store and bought a brand new 2018 MacBook. Anyway, they disassembled it, traded the displays out, which is something you should not be able to do without the diagnostic software, but they were able to do it and everything functioned correctly. So the article says this is a promising sign. The sky isn't falling yet, but it's probably coming. I mean, Apple has already sent out documentation to all these authorized Apple service providers that this is coming as far as the repairs. If you repair certain things on the MacBook Pro, all the major components, that you will not be able to complete repairs, of course, without running their proprietary diagnostic software. The computer will not function without that software. So, Apple fanboys, I don't know what to tell you. Eventually, you need to start looking for a hardware company that respects you. I mean, Apple, in a lot of ways, they're just raping the consumer. And the second story on the docket tonight is Microsoft joins the Open Invention Network, and they open source over 60,000 of their patents. Now, this is just an unbelievable story, because this is not the Microsoft I grew up with, right? This is a completely new Microsoft. Microsoft just open sourced 60,000 patents, proving it really does love Linux. This story from Forbes, written by Jason Evangelo. Microsoft really does love Linux. We even have the picture here, Microsoft Hearts Linux. You guys may remember that from a few months back. Microsoft also posted that they heart Git. Remember, they posted that right before they bought GitHub. Anyway, Jason Evangelo, reading briefly from his article here. I'm at a loss with how to properly begin this article because it suddenly feels like we're living in an alternate timeline, one where the behemoth Microsoft abandons billions in patent royalties to prove its love for Linux, open source software, and the development community. So, Microsoft has been telling everybody it loves Linux, it loves open source, it's embracing open source, and that it's really wanting to attract the development community. It's all about developers, developers, developers. You guys may remember that with Microsoft. We also talked a little bit about how Microsoft was trying to attract developers on last week's show of Taking Into Account. And the same thing here. So they're really all in with open source because what do developers love? Well, a lot of developers love open source. So they're hoping that it will attract some development. Of course, Microsoft wants to get into the cloud market game. So, alternate timeline, Jason Evangelo mentions, yes, this is not the Microsoft of the early 2000s. This is certainly not the Microsoft of the 80s and 90s. This is a completely new company. And he's right. They just abandoned billions of dollars in patent royalties by open sourcing 60,000 patents, most of them related to Linux and open source software. First of all, let's start with Microsoft joining the Open Invention Network. Many of you probably have never heard of the Open Invention Network. This press release from Globe Newswire, the Open Invention Network announced today that Microsoft has become a member. By joining the OIN, Microsoft is demonstrating its commitment to open source software and innovation through collaborative development. With more than 2,650 members, including numerous Fortune 500 enterprises, the OIN is the largest patent non-aggression community in history, and it represents a core set of community values related to open source licensing, which has become the norm. So what the Open Invention Network is basically, again, it's a patent non-aggression community. So it goes against basically patent trolls, right? It is about especially regarding open source software. So the fact that Microsoft is joining this is gigantic. Other members of the OIN include, well, again, it has over 2,600 members, but, giant companies like, Google and IBM. Linux-related companies, SUSE is a member, Canonical is a member, even things like car companies, Ford is a member of the OIN. So the fact that Microsoft is, embracing open source, but also they're trying to get away from, back in the day, they were kind of labeled a patent troll. Most people don't realize this, but one of the biggest money makers for Microsoft is Android, because of patents that Microsoft owns that they've, they have some of these phone manufacturers like Samsung paying them, I don't know, $1 or $2 for every Android phone that is activated, basically. Microsoft makes billions every year off of Android. Microsoft doesn't have anything to do with Android. They didn't develop anything related to Android. But that is a huge moneymaker for them. Microsoft makes billions on that, and they are apparently giving that up with these patents, because these 60,000 patents, most of them were related to a lot of the Linux and open source patents that Microsoft held. And in the process, they've now made all these 60,000 patents open source. What does that do? Well, the article says, this may silence skeptics, potentially, yeah. I mean, I will admit this is the biggest thing Microsoft has done since trying to, get into Linux and open source. I said, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. They've got to do more than just talk about, loving Linux and open source and all this stuff. It's actions that matter. And this action here is gigantic. I mean, releasing 60,000 patents. These were money-making patents, too, some of them. So, I've got to give them credit. They will have silenced me for a little bit. I will say that. This is gigantic. Not only that, it serves to further protect the Linux development community from patent infringement lawsuits. So, just gigantic news. I mean, this is, again, it mentions this article in Forbes. Some of the 2,600 members include things like Sony, SpaceX. I mean, it's a lot of gigantic companies that are a member of the Open Invention Network. It's going to be strange to see how investors in Microsoft react to this, because, again, Microsoft, they made something like $6 billion a year off of some of these patents, especially the ones related to Android. Again, Microsoft makes a ton of money off of these patents because of Android, because of how successful Android is, and they have these settlements with some of these companies to pay them, a fee for all these Android devices that are activated. So it will be interesting to see how this affects stock price. But as far as how Microsoft is seen in the open source community, the patents, and joining the OIN, that's a big deal. And probably the biggest criticizers of Microsoft over the years, obviously one of the biggest is Richard Stallman and the Free Software Foundation. They released a statement about this. So the FSF statement on Microsoft joining the Open Invention Network. So for many years, the FSF has called on Microsoft to cease its use of computational idea patents to aggressively intimidate free software developers, distributors, and users. Today, these calls have met with some tentative success. So they're giving Microsoft a little credit, right? They're giving it a little credit. For years, they've been complaining about Microsoft's, how it used patents and proprietary software. And basically, they were a patent troll in many cases, how they use that to intimidate developers and computer users in general. Now, the new announcement that Microsoft has joined both LOT and the Open Invention Network are significant steps in the right direction, potentially providing respite from Microsoft's well-known extortion of billions of dollars from free software redistributors. So Microsoft, they made billions off of all these patents and these patent trolls, but now they're stepping away. Do you just forget about everything they did in the past? Well, the Free Software Foundation isn't, but they are giving them some credit. But they do want more from Microsoft, the Free Software Foundation. There's a couple of things they would like to see Microsoft do in addition to this. They would like Microsoft to make a clear, unambiguous statement that it has ceased all patent infringement claims on the use of Linux in Android. Something they haven't done just yet, but they may. Again, Microsoft makes a lot of money off of Android because of patents, but yeah, it would be nice if they came out publicly and said, yeah, we're done with this. We're not trying to basically hold Linux and Android hostage, with some of these patent infringement claims. Another thing that would be nice if Microsoft did was work within the OIN to expand the definition of what it calls the, quote, Linux system, so that the list of packages protected from patents actually includes everything found in a GNU/Linux system. Interesting ideas. Anyway, I will link to all the articles. I will link to the Forbes article about Microsoft open sourcing 60,000 patents. I will also link to the press release here about the Open Invention Network, Microsoft joining that, and of course I will link to the FSF statement on Microsoft joining the OIN. And the third story on the docket tonight. GNOME plans to no longer use application menus starting with version 3.32. So, in the upcoming version of GNOME, they're on 3.30 right now, but the next version, 3.32, application menus, or app menus as they're often called, are the menu that you see in the GNOME 3 top bar. So, let me take a look at this picture here. A lot of times in GNOME you have this top bar here, and when you have an application open like this one, you will see the name of the application and an icon, and when you click on it you'll get a menu like right here in the top bar. That's going away. That's the one they're talking about getting rid of. These menus have been with us since the beginning of the GNOME 3.0 series, but we're planning on retiring them. This post is intended to provide some background on the change. So, background. When they were first supposed to contain an application level menu item like preferences, about, quit. Okay, so the application menus originally, they were supposed to just contain your standard stuff, preferences, about, quit. What you expect in a, quote, application menu. But unfortunately, we've seen app menus not performing well over the years despite efforts to improve them, yada yada yada. One of the things is consistency. Not every application used that application menu. Some of them put strange things in it. Some applications didn't use the menu at all. So when you click the application name at the top bar for the application menu, the only thing in a menu you got was just one entry: quit. Quit the program. So it got to the point where you weren't sure what applications were using the menu, which ones were. Plus, you also already had a menu system in some of the apps. So if I go back to this first picture, for example, if I view the image here, you see you have this application menu in the app. So you have that menu, then you had a different menu somewhere here at the top bar. Why did you have two different menu systems? Again, it's kind of confusing. So now they're getting rid of that top bar application menu, and now they're going to put everything in the program menu itself inside the application. So it's going to look something like this. So you click on the little menu icon here inside the application, and then you get some kind of menu, including your about and preferences and whatnot that normally would have been in that top bar panel. Now they're just putting everything in one spot, which honestly makes sense. I agree, it was confusing. It was one of those things when you put like a new user on a GNOME distro, you kind of had to explain to them how the menu system worked, because it wasn't very intuitive for the new user. That top bar application menu really didn't make sense. So I'm glad they kind of got away from that. Putting everything in the window in the programs themselves makes sense. The only thing I would have rather them do is, I wish they would have went the other way, got rid of the menus in the applications, and went with putting the menus at the top, a global menu, a Mac OS style global menu, or a Unity style global menu in the top bar would have been, I think, the better choice, a saner choice, and quite frankly, a more user-friendly choice, especially for new to Linux users. Anyway, reading a little more, we're planning to remove the application menus from GNOME in time for the next release, version 3.32. The application menu will no longer be shown in the top bar, and yada yada yada. The technical changes involved in removing app menus are quite simple, but there are a lot of apps to convert, so they got some work to do to get this done. There were several comments, by the way, in this announcement over at the GNOME blog about, and several of them actually mentioned what I just did. Wouldn't it be better just to do a global Mac OS kind of menu or a Unity style menu? And basically, the GNOME developer said, no, we can't do that. That's really not how we do things. We're not set up for that sort of thing. So they're just going to go, again, with the app menu now just being in the programs themselves. So you get this thing and nothing at the top bar anymore. You won't get the app icon, the app name, just getting rid of all that. It didn't make sense. So for me personally, I don't mind. I'm not a GNOME user anyway, but I actually think this is a good change. I know a lot of people kind of gripe about GNOME removing things, removing functionality, but this was one that was kind of confusing, and I think it is better for the users if you don't have menus, in multiple spots. You just put everything in one spot. Yeah. And the fourth story on the docket tonight is another disturbing one. This one is about Flatpak. Is Flatpak as safe and secure as we've been told? One website says no. In fact, this website calls Flatpak, quote, a security nightmare. So, the website I'm talking about is flatkill.org. Flatkill.org is really just like a one-page website. Very very short, simple, to the point, easy to understand. But since the guy that created this website posted this, put it on the internet, it has really sparked a lot of controversy in the Linux community. You've seen it mentioned all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit is where I first heard about it. You've even got news articles. OMG Ubuntu posted an article written by Joey Snedden. The new website claims Flatpak is a, quote, security nightmare. I'll come back to this article, but let's go to flatkill.org itself. Reading the blurb at the top of the page, Red Hat's Flatpak has been getting a lot of attention lately. It's the self-proclaimed new way of distributing desktop applications on Linux. It's secure, they say. So, anyway, and then he goes on, the sandbox is a lie. So, Flatpak is one of these containerized package formats. Everything's supposed to be sandboxed, right? So if you get one of these malicious Flatpaks, it is all in a container. It's all sandbox. It can't affect the rest of your system, right? Well, according to him, wrong. Almost all popular applications on FlatHub, the biggest, Flatpak store, FlatHub come with file system equals host, file system equals home or device equals all permissions. That is, they come with write permissions to the user home directory, and more in some cases. So that means that you're really not sandboxed. If the Flatpak can write to your user's home directory, there's no sandbox, right? And he says it's easy to escape the sandbox. All you got to do, and he gives you the shell command to escape the sandbox. And he says this includes applications, popular Flatpak applications like GIMP, VS Code, PyCharm, Octave, Inkscape, Steam, Audacity, VLC, etc., etc., etc. He also mentions the fact you're not getting security updates, at least not in a timely fashion, with Flatpak. So official applications and runtimes are vulnerable to known, easily exploitable code execution vulnerabilities. Some of the vulnerabilities have been known for half a year. So there are Flatpaks out there that are weeks or sometimes months behind on patching security vulnerabilities. So, for example, there's some new exploit out in the wild. Your Linux system, Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch, what have you, patches things pretty quickly. But these Flatpaks, these sandbox, containerized package formats, sometimes lag behind weeks or sometimes months getting these things patched. So he mentions one in particular with GIMP. There was a critical shell in the ghost vulnerability that the GIMP Flatpak was 1 month behind in patching compared to, all the other Linux distributions. So looking a little further down the page, he talks about a local root exploit. Well, I guess he says minor issue, exclamation point, and that's not a minor issue. Then he talks briefly about future of application distribution. So anyway, flatkill.org. I will link to the website. The article over at OMG Ubuntu by Joey Snedden talks about flatkill.org. He basically rehashes some of just what I read from the website, but he also ponders, should we be worried? He says, quote, blunt though the viral website is, it is clear that the author behind it cares about the Linux desktop, user expectations, and the application security. I would agree. Reading the flatkill.org page, I do not sense that this guy is a troll in any way. He just cares about Linux security. He wants people to be aware of some of the limitations, I guess, from something like Flatpak. Also, we need to consider that, according to Joey Snedden here at the OMG Ubuntu article, this situation is not unique to Flatpak or to the FlatHub App Store. Absolutely. So everything that the Flatkill website's talking about, that applies to other package formats too. Joey mentions many popular Snap apps don't make use of strict confinement either. But settings related to sandboxing and permissions, or lack thereof, is decided by the application packager, not the creator of the format. So he's basically saying, hey, everything you just talked about Flatpak, most of it applies to Snap packages too, which he's right. But he says, regardless, Snap, packs, Flatpaks, what have you, it's not the people that created these formats that are the problem. This guy was criticizing Red Hat, creating Flatpak. Many people talk about Canonical creating snaps the same way, snaps are not as secure as they should be. It's Canonical's fault. No, it's not really the creator of the formats. The problem is some of the people that are packaging these applications are not packaging them in a way to be secure. So that is the problem. Also, Flatpak could throw up a GUI permission dialog to ask for file system write permissions on first run. So what he's talking about here, Joey, in the article, when you install a Flatpak using the command line, you pretty much get some kind of dialog information. You kind of know about the write permissions, but if you install Flatpak through a GUI tool, you really have no idea what's going on. So it would be nice, he mentions, if there was some kind of dialog box that tells you, some of the potential security issues you could have with bad write permissions. Joey goes on to talk about he's a big fan of Snap apps, as am I. I've got Flatpaks apps, app images, and snaps all on my Manjaro install. All three package formats work fine. He mentions that there's some problems with permissions, depending on whether you use strict snaps or what they call classic snaps, because of the write permissions. one thing we should briefly talk about, I mentioned, a lot of what he talks about with Flatpaks, a lot of these security issues, the sandboxing issues and the write permission issues probably apply to snaps as well. Do they apply to app images? Well, let's take the sandbox one. App images are not sandboxed at all, so there's not even a sandbox with app images. So yes, all three package formats, people can criticize Flatpak, Snap, and app images, for security issues, but is it fair? Think about if you run an Ubuntu or an Ubuntu-based distribution, and you install packages from PPAs, such as Joey Snedden in the article, he mentions PPAs and installing something like OBS through a PPA. With a PPA, as far as permissions, when you add a PPA and install software from a PPA, those applications have root access on your system. Imagine the security problems with something like that using a PPA. Those of us using Arch-based Linux distributions, I'm running Manjaro on my main machine. I've got Arco on the laptop behind me. If I install something from the Arch user repository, the AUR, I've pretty much given that package root permission to do anything it wants, installing that package. So, you can criticize Flatpak, Snap, and app images all day long, but if you're also using things like PPAs and AUR packages, it's being disingenuous, right? But I'm glad that the flatkill.org website is raising awareness about some of these security issues, because I do think we need to rethink some of what we're doing with these package formats. And the fifth and final story on the docket tonight is Linux for Kids. I'm going to discuss 10 of the best educational applications for children. So this article over at FOSSMint, written by Martin, 10 best Linux educational software for your kids. There was actually a typo in the very first paragraph, because he mentions he's going to bring us 15 of the best Linux educational software for kids. So the title says 10, this paragraph says 15. He only discusses 10. So the number one in his top 10 Linux educational programs for kids is Canagram with a K. So Canagram with a K, as you may guess, is a KDE application. KDE, by the way, has a ton of educational programs as part of the KDE's suite of software. When I review a lot of these KDE distros, the one that comes with, full suites of software, some of the heftier, bloated distros, the educational category is usually full of a lot of the KDE games. So I want to give the KDE devs big props on creating a lot of these applications for kids. Canagram, it is a vocabulary game. You get these letter tiles. Kids have to make words out of it. There's no time limit, no limit on the number of tries. Great for younger kids. Canagram, great game. GCompress is a awesome suite of applications. It comes with over 100 engaging activities. These activities include algebra, quizzes, drawing, reading, practice, memory games, tic-tac-toe, chess, etc. GCompress is a great program. TuxPaint. Kids, love to paint. Kids love to draw. TuxPaint is an award-winning drawing program targeted at children between the ages of 3 and 12. As you can see, pretty easy UI, big buttons, big fonts. Kids can navigate TuxPaint pretty easily. Great program. Matter of fact, TuxPaint, you see installed by default sometimes on Linux distros. So TuxPaint, pretty popular program. Child's Play. Child's Play is a free app for Linux and Windows, featuring a collection of educational activities, such as alphabet, spelling, math, Pac-Man, and of course they're talking about Pac-Man the game, not Pac-Man Arch's package manager, puzzles, etc. Child's Play. K-Stars, as you might guess, another KDE application. This is an astronomy application. I've seen K-Stars installed by default on a few Linux distros. K-Word Quiz, again, another KDE application, is a word game for learning vocabulary and various other subjects like anatomy, music, history. Think of it as kind of like a flashcard application. Scratch. Scratch is computer programming. It is for kids learning how to program. Scratch. Nice application. Celestia. This is a real-time 3D simulation app. It lets you visualize space by exploring the universe in 3 dimensions. So, neat little program. I've seen Celestia installed by default on a few Linux distros out there. TuxMath. TuxMath is you play as our main character, Tux. Tux, of course, is the Linux mascot, the penguin. Tux is the name of that penguin, for those that were not aware. Anyway, the main character of the game is Tux, the penguin, and his job is to protect the planet from math problems. Math problems that literally rain down on him. So, pretty cool math game. Number 10 in Martin's list here is Maple. Maple is a proprietary math software that reportedly houses the most powerful math engine in the world. So, another math game. Anyway, I'll link to Martin's article here of the 10 best educational software, Linux educational software for your kids. And that was the fifth and final story on the docket tonight. So this was Taking Into Account, episode 12. I release a new episode of Taking Into Account every Thursday. So this is a weekly show. I try to release a new episode sometime every Thursday. Now, usually to end the show, other than the 5 main topics, I read a viewer comment, question, email. A lot of times I pull stuff down from Mastodon. So in the last couple of days, I've gotten some questions over on Mastodon. One of them, actually just earlier today, somebody was asking me, has anybody seen DistroTube? And somebody asked, hey, you there? Asking me, DistroTube, am I there? Somebody else, yeah, I've been wondering the same thing. Where's DistroTube at? So I haven't posted a video on YouTube, at the DistroTube channel here on YouTube. I haven't posted since Sunday. Going 3 or 4 days without a video from me is kind of rare. I usually don't take more than a couple of days off at a time. So people were legitimately concerned. I'm still here. I was just busy at work. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week was very busy for me. I just didn't have time to make anything, even something short that takes, a few minutes. Kind of changed my roles at work. Also, my schedule is a little bit different. I'm kind of struggling managing time as far as work, life, and this channel. But I am still here. One other thing we need to discuss is next Thursday's episode. For work, I'm actually going to be out of town next Thursday, all day. I won't be near a computer, so I cannot record Taking Into Account next Thursday. So next week is also going to be a huge week because the Ubuntu releases, the Ubuntu 18.10 releases drop next week. Matter of fact, Thursday. So what I'm thinking is if I may not make a Taking Into Account next week. I may have to take the week off because I won't be here Thursday anyway. I could pre-record it, maybe pre-record it Tuesday or Wednesday and release it Thursday, but I have to get those main Ubuntu flavors recorded as far as videos about that because that's gigantic stuff, right? So, I love doing these Taking Into Account episodes, but I will get 50 times more views on like the 18.10 mainline Ubuntu release doing a video on that than I will do a Taking Into Account episode. So I really need to focus on all the Ubuntu releases next week, plus I'm going to be out of town all day Thursday. So next week, if I do a Taking Into Account episode, it probably won't be until Friday that I could record it and post it sometime late Friday or maybe Saturday. So we may or may not get an episode next week. I'll keep you guys posted on it. I'll post something on the channel. Hopefully you guys will get a notification. If I decide not to post one, I'll let you know. If I decide to post it a day or two late, I'll also let you know about that. Before I go, this show was made possible by Ansem, Carlos, David, Leor, and Rob. These guys are the producers of the show, my highest tiered Patreon supporters. This show would not be possible without each and every one of you guys. The show is also brought to you by, you see the fine ladies and gentlemen, their names on the screen. That is all my Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting the channel. You will find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. Peace, guys.